Okay, kia ora everyone. It's May the 5th, and I hope you're doing well. Thank you to all of you who have put in your assignments, and for those of you who haven't and who maybe are struggling to put something together, we've kind of made a decision. Donna will reinforce this, that to pass the course, we need you to make a good, honest attempt to do your assignments. So just submit something. For those of you, however, who want to get a grade, who are shooting for grades, then you need to do more than just make an attempt to start. You really do need to kind of finish the assignment. So for those of you struggling to put things together, a pathway for you to simply pass the course is to show that you're engaging in the online discussions and you're making an attempt to do your assignments. And what does an attempt look like? It looks like you've tried. It looks like you have submitted something. It looks like you've tried to address the questions, but maybe you haven't been able to complete in time. You haven't had access to the resources, and you can say that. I think those of you who really don't submit anything or can't, if you want to have an extra conversation about that, please get hold of Amber. Otherwise, I think it's really about, being kind of honest about the situation we're in, that it is not easy for some of you. You don't necessarily have access to the best devices and best Wi-Fi facilities. So we do need you to just give it a good go. And we will look at things compassionately. And of course, you can always kind of come back at us later if you kind of find your feet and you find that you can put up a better version of that assignment. So this week we're kind of the course turns a bit. I really hope that you were able to watch and think about Maastricht's resources, which is about ethics and some of the worst cases that have confronted Indigenous peoples. It's one of the reasons that many Indigenous peoples around the world, in fact all of them, have been very suspicious of research because of the unethical conduct of research, and continually seeing Indigenous peoples as a kind of population that anyone can just go in and do what they want with. And nowadays with Māori, that's not the case. That Māori have developed way more sophisticated skills about dealing with researchers. But, having said that, I'm apprised constantly by community people, our people, who ask me questions. Is this right? Is this how a researcher should conduct themselves? And the answer inevitably is no. It's not right. And one of the first kind of reactions that people have is not here, it's in their puku. It doesn't feel right. But ethics is, there are the compliances around ethics that if you were to do a piece of research for a master's thesis or PhD, that you would have to go through an ethics application process in the university. You'd have to submit your forms and a committee decides whether you can proceed. So the ethical conduct of researchers in universities and in all health facilities is regulated with specific legislative requirements around informed consent, the right to confidentiality, and the right to withdraw. But that's a kind of procedural approach to research. There's another approach to research, which is what I would say more substantive, and that's about thinking, acting with integrity, acting ethically. ethics really means behaving in a morally ethical way, being good. The good way is really the nuts and bolts of what ethical conduct is. Anyway, what I want us to do now in this section of the course is pivot, turn, and now look at the development of Māori and Indigenous methodologies. I think one of your course readings for this week is a chapter called 25 Projects, which comes out of my book, Decolonising Methodologies. Now, I can't put that chapter online, but I do know it exists online out there. Someone has already put it up there, and I think if you kind of Google 25 Indigenous projects, it'll probably come up. So those projects really were a way to kind of disrupt the usual disciplinary approaches to research, and where the literature determines, this is the research you have to do. And much of the research, even now in relation to Māori, is framed in a very deficit frame. It's about what's wrong with us. It's about why we're not achieving. It's about how we cause our own poverty. It's about how we are both the victims and perpetrators of domestic violence, because it's in our culture. So there's a lot of negative and what's called deficit approach to research in relation to Māori. If we move now to thinking about research from an Indigenous perspective, from a Māori perspective, and a kaupapa Māori perspective in particular, then framing it in a deficit way does not do anything for us. In fact, all it does is give us a deficit answer. All right, a deficit framing, deficit-based question gives us a deficit answer. It's not based on our strengths, and it also excludes our knowledge and experience, and the fact that we're not inherently hopeless and pathetic. So Indigenous methodologies really try and come at the work that we ought to be doing in our communities from those perspectives, from a perspective of what does it mean for colonised peoples who are aspiring to sovereignty to do the research. What does it mean to bring in, aspects of Indigenous knowledge or mātauranga Māori? How do we apply our own tikanga to some of the questions and approaches that we're making? So this section starts to get you to think about those things. So, the lectures and topics that you've dealt with up until now have really been a critique of European Pākehā approaches to research and their traditions about research. And then this part of the course, we start to look more deeply at other ways of doing research. Obviously, if you are not reading a lot of research and you haven't thought about these things, you might find it does your head in a bit. But the real question is, if you don't want to do bad research, deficit research that doesn't do anything for us, well then what's the research we should be doing, and how should we be doing it? And what things do we know work best? So there's some basic things. We know if you send out a big survey to Māori, they won't fill it in and they won't send it back. So that seems like a pointless methodology, doesn't it? Whereas we know if you go to a hui, you go to Matatini, you will encounter thousands of Māori. And if if you're known to them, if they see you as having credibility, and if you're willing to stand up and talk to your kaupapa, they will give you the time and they'll fill your survey out. But then what do surveys tell us? They don't necessarily tell us the sorts of things that we might be interested in. For example, if you want to do the history of your hapu, doing a survey is not really the best method to do that. the kind of method you have to do is one that involves speaking to people who know something about that history, and also looking for archival material, whether it's in the archives or it's in people's homes. Now, to do that kind of research, you really do have to think about the ethical approach. Also, you all know that there are huge debates online about stealing intellectual property, appropriating images, co-opting all sorts of things. And when we're thinking about research, we have to think about that all the time. In order to be rigorous, we have to know our sources. It's kind of a fundamental thing in research, that if you are getting research by asking questions of people, then there's a record through the ethics process that establishes you did do that. You didn't just make it up. But also, if you're looking through archives, looking through existing literature, looking through film, looking through photographs, that you're referencing those. So everything you are learning at undergraduate level is helping you understand how fundamentally important those standards are to even thinking about research. People have to trust that researchers did an honest, ethical, and rigorous job. If they can't trust that, then they can't trust it at all. Then it makes us untrustworthy. And I think in our world, or in the Māori world, there are lots of different ways in which, both trust and lack of trust has greater implications than just doing a shitty piece of work. Because if people don't trust you, that impacts on pretty much everything else that you might want to do. So think about that bigger kind of scope that we're now entering into. There's some good online work. We've posted some fundamental things up on Moodle, which you will find helpful, but actually there's way more on YouTube. If you look up Leonie Pihama, I think during this COVID-19, Leonie, Graham and I have done a series of webinars plotting out the history of kaupapa Māori. But there's also some cool resources on pūrākau, oral histories. Some of you are taking Nepia Mohuika's course. So, different Māori approaches to thinking even about history or geography and place and the environment. So these are not just methods for what we do in the Faculty of Māori and Indigenous Studies. These are ways of thinking about Indigenous research in a positive sense, using Indigenous methodologies across the board, even in the formation of statistics, even in the development of science questions. That if the question from the get-go is a negative, deficit, and frankly off question, then we would argue whatever you find is going to be similarly off and a waste of everybody's time and money. And also it is disrespectful ultimately to us. Have a good week. Things look like they're getting better. We may or may not see each other up front. Don't know when we will be back on campus even. Hopefully when we're in level 2, we can go back into our offices. But I think this course will continue online until the end of semester. So hopefully you got your groove. I hope you watched those 2 videos I posted for Denzel Washington and one of the Hawaiian mayors. There's, if you're not feeling that motivated or positive about things, or feeling anxious, I do advise that you kind of not only seek out resources that are online and can help you, but actually the university counselling service is still open. Student health is still open, and I do encourage you to reach out. Don't feel lonely. Don't feel that being anxious is unique to you. The situation we're in has caused all kinds of anxieties for everyone. So don't feel whakama about asking for help. Amber's there. You can talk directly to her or to Donna and I or someone else in our faculty. Libby's the other one. Just so we can put you in touch with someone who's got more specialist skills to do that. So take care of yourselves. Don't beat yourself up if you haven't kind of attained what you want to attain. Just try and get into a good groove and a good rhythm and enjoy the rest of the week.